The system was abandoned a long time ago. Of course, it had to be. Although back then it wasn't called Sol, it was called something else. But who the hell? Sol? Really? To this day, it still makes everyone snicker. Why would they name it after that? Ugh. Still, the system had to be abandoned after the twin planets collided and spread all sorts of debris all over the system. Now, they have turned into an asteroid belt that traverses between the fourth and fifth planet. Because of this, it became far too dangerous to travel through the sector, so we simply had to go around it. It became to what the locals call it now as a briar patch. This is no better demonstrated than what happened to the fourth planet in the system, that once had mountains, lakes, streams, and so much life, yet it was pounded by so much debris that is now a worthless hunk of rock. Unfortunately, the species that was on there could not get off, and the inhabitants were destroyed completely. Well, at least those that were on the surface. Those that remained subterranean only come up once in a while, yet they still remain. Unfortunately, what can be located is their old reactors, those that they used to siphon energy. Well, they did explode, leaving large areas of their planet completely uninhabitable even by them. However, that's not the interesting part. Around 6 to 7,000 of their solar cycles ago, a planet just seemed to appear, unnoticed, uncharted. It was unbelievable. And when it was rediscovered or discovered periodically, it was covered with flora and fauna of all different types. It was strange. Many decided that they would try to examine it, but they would end up getting caught in that wretched asteroid belt, as there was no way to get through it without getting tore up. Eventually, the asteroid belt did recede, but not before an exploration ship got caught in it, and unfortunately, it didn't make it. The few survivors were sent to this blue world that seemed to just happen to arrive. Many of them believed that they could simply scatter themselves around the planet, stay in stasis until they actually reached, and they'd be able to avoid the local population of bipeds that were there. They still had to worry about the extremely horrifying fauna that was there, many of which that, well, let's just say it's a good thing they're not around anymore. Unfortunately, by their own censors, before they even arrived, the world changed. Something happened. All the creatures seemed to be pushed away from a certain area and scattered across as though they were suddenly kicked out of their own territory. This was odd. But they were still in stasis and couldn't actually look at it. Eventually, the survivors did land across the planet in different areas. Their sudden appearance to this place, well, made all the locals believe that the arrivals were deities. With no way to get a signal for rescue, they used the natural components of the world to produce electricity, power to trick the locals, and of course to communicate with each other. Throughout the world, dozens of these different power stations were set up. Unfortunately, they had no decent technology, so they had to make everything from scrap. Items that would usually fit in the palm of one's hand were now 3 times the size of their house, or better. It turned out that these generators turned out to be massive devices that would take generations to actually build. Yet, once they were built, things were good. Well, for them. And it was good for a while. Eventually, their own hubris seemed to drive something of this planet to fight them. Creating massive sculptures of themselves, they separated the young from the old, and told the young those were the true deities of this planet, and they should be the only one being worshipped. In that time, the bounty of the world was evident, so much that the visitors became bored with what was there. There was so much food around, so much game. So they began to do what self important idiots do: eugenics. Across the entire planet, They began with slight alterations, mainly through selective breeding. They made differences across many of the locals. It was fun until it was not. You see, the locals began to rebel, hating these adjustments, and leave the largest settlements en masse in seemingly one go. Somehow, they're able to avoid the massive reptilian species that still roam the land and escape. Also, seemingly able to control the flow of a massive river in order to escape capture. The locals simply fled off into an area they should not have been able to survive, especially not for 35 to 40 cycles. This doesn't make sense. No matter the amount of local hunters sent, the rebels simply evaded capture. It's like they couldn't see them. It isn't until the rebels started fighting each other that things truly changed. The numbers of those that defied their former rulers had grown exponentially, and now, well, they seemed to fight each other for power, and they all wanted control. They wanted to be the strongest, the one that everyone else knelt to. While this was going on, it seemed as though they were going to destroy each other, yet something strange happened as they decided to turn against each other and against the flora and fauna itself, seemingly. A sudden rise in the waters of the planet shorted out all the massive energy generators, and it just kept rising. And it kept rising so much that it began to drown everything. The waters stayed around and rose continuously for well over 10 to 15 cycles, then held, and then receded around the same time. It was odd, but as it receded, it was clear that the water had killed all but a few. They drowned all of them, and all the earth seemed to reach up, grab a hold of them, and pulled them down, burying the former large reptiles that once ruled the planet, bringing all sorts of fear. But no, they were now gone. Only a few had seen fit to prepare for this event, as though they actually knew it was coming, as though someone told them, yet no one could see. Looking through the few records that remain, no one knew. How could these few know? This flood drowning even the visitors to this planet that called themselves gods. Now, the organic drones are sent to the planet to find out how they survived such a thing. And they sent back such horrifying reports. The survivors of that flood that became the dominant species, they stretched across the planet in their own sort of tribes, so to think of. And it was strange to look at, yet they somehow were able to not only live, but thrive so well. And yet now they've reached a point that if you wanted to consider invasion, it's a bad idea. Those locals are more than willing to destroy their own planet to stop an invasion. These locals also have a potential that scares us all. They have a potential that is only tapped into by a few, but only one at a time they begin to track into this ability. We fear this beyond everything, as the locals seem to be able to reach out with their consciousness beyond the confines of their own bodies, their continents, their world, their systems, and beyond. They only have to train, and they could all do this. They have the ability to see all time, to live their lives over and over in moments. They can even become telepathic if they choose. Oh, the horror of this. Thankfully, our drones are working with the locals that have the most hold, the most power to delay this for as long as possible. However, our best estimates are 12 cycles, what the locals call years, probably 10, before the general population discovers time travel. And when it does, oh, great Maker, help us all. This report was prematurely ended due to excessive mental anxiety from the one presenting it. In conclusion, one final note must be adhered to. The planet, known in the sector as Sol 3, is known by the locals as Earth. Its inhabitants are humans. Best recommendation? Judging from past to predict future events, it is best that if we either completely avoid or make peace. Decision is yours. Official report submitted to the Zeta Reticulan Council.